New York City in 1911 was a city of immigrants and ambition. Hundreds of thousands of people had poured into the city from Eastern Europe and Southern Europe in the previous decades, fleeing poverty, fleeing persecution, chasing the dream of a better life in America. Many of them ended up in the crowded tenement buildings of the Lower East Side, working in the garment factories that had made New York the clothing capital of the world. The work was hard, the hours were long, the pay was low. But it was work, and for young women who had come to America with nothing, it was a foothold, a beginning, a chance. And for the young women who worked at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors of the Ash Building in Greenwich Village, it was about to become something else entirely. At 4:40 p.m. on Saturday, March 25, 1911, a fire broke out on the 8th floor of the Ash Building. It started in a bin of fabric scraps beneath one of the cutting tables, a discarded cigarette. A match carelessly dropped. Nobody knows exactly how it started, but in that room packed with fabric and thread and paper patterns, the fire spread with terrifying speed. Within minutes, the entire 8th floor was ablaze. Workers scrambled for the exits. The stairwell doors opened. Workers on the 8th floor managed to escape that way. But on the 9th floor, where most of the workers were concentrated, the situation was catastrophically different. When the workers on the 9th floor rushed to the exit doors, they found them locked. The doors that should have been their escape route were locked from the outside, and the fire was already at their backs. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory employed around 500 workers. The vast majority of them were young women. Many were teenagers. Most were recent immigrants from Italy and Eastern Europe, Jewish girls from Russia and Poland, Catholic girls from Sicily and Naples. They had come to America dreaming of freedom and opportunity. Instead, they found themselves working 6 days a week, 9 to 10 hours a day, in cramped, airless rooms packed with sewing machines and fabric. For wages of between $7 and $12 a week, they were skilled workers. Their nimble fingers produced the fashionable blouses called shirtwaists that middle-class American women wore. They were good at their jobs. They were proud of their work. And they had no idea that the building they worked in every day was a death trap. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was owned by two men, Max Blank and Isaac Harris. They were themselves immigrants who had built a successful business from nothing. The factory occupied the top 3 floors of the 10-story Ash Building. The rooms were packed with row upon row of sewing machines. Fabric and thread were piled everywhere. Scraps of material littered the floors. In such an environment, fire was an ever-present danger. The factory had experienced fires before. Minor ones that had been quickly contained. The owners knew the risks, and they had made a decision that would cost 146 people their lives. To keep the exit doors locked during working hours, to prevent workers from taking unauthorized breaks, to stop theft of fabric and finished garments. The doors were locked, and the workers inside had no idea. What happened on the 9th floor of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in the next 30 minutes was a scene of unimaginable horror. Workers crowded the locked exit doors, desperately pulling at handles that would not turn. Some found the fire escape and began climbing down. It groaned and buckled under their weight and eventually collapsed, sending women falling to their deaths in the alley below. Some workers made it to the elevator. The elevator operator made trip after trip up and down, rescuing as many people as he could until the heat became too intense to continue. And then the remaining workers on the 9th floor faced an impossible choice. Stay and burn, or jump. Many jumped, Witnesses on the street below watched in horror as young women fell from the windows 9 stories above. The fire department's ladders only reached the 6th floor. They could do nothing. The streets around the Ash building filled rapidly with horrified onlookers. Passers-by stopped and stared upward, unable to believe what they were seeing. Young women standing on window ledges, choosing between fire and a 9-story fall. Firefighters arrived quickly, but their equipment was useless against a fire at this height. Their ladders fell short by 3 floors. Their safety nets tore when the falling bodies hit them. Police tried to hold back the crowds. Reporters and photographers captured images that would be published in newspapers across the country the following day. Images so shocking that they would change America. But in those 30 minutes on that Saturday afternoon, there was nothing anyone on the street could do. They could only watch and remember. When the fire was finally extinguished, the full scale of the tragedy became clear. 146 workers were dead, 123 women and 23 men. The youngest victim was 14 years old. Many of the bodies were so badly burned they could not be identified. Families crowded the makeshift morgue that had been set up on a pier on the East River, desperately searching for their daughters and sisters and wives. The grief that spread through the immigrant communities of New York was profound and overwhelming. These were not wealthy or powerful people. They were ordinary workers, young women who had come to America looking for a better life. And they had died because 2 men had decided that locked doors were more important than human lives. The public reaction to the Triangle Fire was one of the most powerful expressions of collective outrage in American history. On April 5, 1911, just 11 days after the fire, a funeral procession was held for the unidentified victims. Over 350,000 people lined the streets of New York in the rain to pay their respects. Another 100,000 marched in the procession. It was one of the largest public gatherings New York had ever seen. Labor unions that had been fighting for better working conditions for years now had the attention of the entire country. The International Ladies' Garment Workers Union, which had led a major strike at the Triangle factory just 2 years earlier and been turned away, had been proven tragically right. Something had to change. Max Blank and Isaac Harris were indicted for manslaughter. The trial that followed outraged survivors and labor advocates across the country. The prosecution argued that the owners knew the doors were locked and that this knowledge made them responsible for the deaths of their workers. The defense argued that the owners could not have known the doors were locked at the moment the fire broke out. After deliberating for less than 2 hours, the jury found both men not guilty. The verdict caused an explosion of outrage. Survivors wept in the courtroom. Labor organizers condemned the justice system. 3 years later, Blank and Harris were sued in a civil case by the families of 23 victims. They settled for $75 per life lost. They had collected $60,000 in fire insurance for the factory. They made a profit from the deaths of their workers. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire changed America. The outrage that followed the fire and the acquittal of the owners fueled the labor movement in ways that nothing else had. Frances Perkins, a young social reformer who witnessed women jumping from the windows that day, dedicated her life to changing workplace safety laws. She later became Franklin Roosevelt's Secretary of Labor, the first woman ever to serve in a presidential cabinet. She was the driving force behind some of the most important labor legislation in American history. The New Deal programs that created minimum wage laws, overtime protections, child labor restrictions. All of it grew in part from what she saw on that street corner on March 25, 1911. The Triangle Fire gave America its labor movement, and the labor movement gave American workers the protections they have today. 146 workers, 123 of them women, the youngest just 14 years old, killed because two men decided that locked doors were worth more than human lives, and those two men walked free. Max Blank and Isaac Harris were never punished. They collected their insurance money and moved on. But the workers they killed did not die in vain. Their deaths changed America. Their names deserve to be remembered. If this story moved you, subscribe to Echoes of the Dead, because every single week we tell the stories of the forgotten, the betrayed, and the exploited. Because every single one of those 146 workers deserved better. And this channel will never let the world forget them.